The blade caught the moonlight as it sliced through the air, aimed directly at Anthony Okafor's throat. But instead of finding its target, it met the wooden handle of a mop, wielded by a woman in a simple uniform who shouldn't have been there at 2 a.m. "Stay back, sir," Serena Williams commanded, her voice steady as steel as she disarmed a trained assassin with moves that would have impressed a military instructor. The would-be killer hit the marble floor with a sickening thud, unconscious before he knew what happened. Anthony stared in shock at his 71st maid, the one who'd just saved his life. Unlike the 69 before her who'd tried to seduce him, this one had just fought an assassin for him. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell if you want to hear more incredible stories like this one. And comment below, what would you have done in Serena's position? To understand how we got here, we need to go back 6 months earlier. Anthony Okafor wasn't just any billionaire. At 30, he was Nigeria's youngest tech mogul, worth over $2 billion from his revolutionary fintech company that had transformed banking across West Africa. His palatial mansion on the outskirts of Abuja was a testament to his success. 15 bedrooms, marble imported from Italy, and security systems that rivaled government buildings. But Anthony had a problem that money couldn't solve: trust. In 5 years, he'd fired 69 domestic staff members. 69. The tabloids had a field day with it, calling him everything from the maid killer to Nigeria's most difficult bachelor. But Anthony knew the truth. Every single one had crossed boundaries, attempted seduction, or worse, betrayed his privacy to the press. There was Jennifer, who'd planted hidden cameras in his bedroom to sell footage to gossip blogs. Grace, who'd drugged his evening tea hoping to seduce him while he was vulnerable. And then there was Patience, who'd actually invited her entire family to move into the guest quarters without permission, claiming Anthony had promised to take care of them. Each dismissal came with the same speech: "Your services are no longer required. Security will escort you out." Anthony had built walls so high around his heart that even he sometimes forgot what genuine human connection felt like. Meanwhile, in a small village in Enugu State, Serena Williams was fighting battles of her own. At 26, she was the daughter of a retired army sergeant who taught her that discipline and integrity were worth more than all the money in the world. Her younger brother, David, had been diagnosed with a rare heart condition that required surgery costing millions of naira, money their family didn't have. When the domestic agency in Abuja called with a high-paying position for a very particular client, Serena didn't hesitate. She needed the job, not for luxury, but for survival. Her family's survival. The morning Serena arrived at Anthony's mansion, the head of security, Mr. Ibrahim, gave her the briefing that had become routine: don't approach Mr. Okafor unless spoken to. Don't ask personal questions. Don't enter his private study or bedroom unless specifically instructed. And whatever you do, don't get any ideas about romance. You're here to work, nothing more. Serena listened with the stoic expression she'd inherited from her father. "Understood, sir. I'm here to work, earn my salary, and return home. Nothing more, nothing less." What struck Anthony immediately was her indifference. When he walked through the main hall that first morning, Serena was already working, polishing the banister with methodical precision. She glanced up, offered a respectful nod, and returned to her task without the lingering stares, giggling, or accidental touches he'd grown accustomed to from previous staff. For 3 weeks, their interactions were minimal and professional. Serena arrived at 6 a.m., worked her assigned areas with military precision, ate her meals in the kitchen staff quarters, and was gone by 8 p.m. She didn't ask about his business, didn't comment on his lifestyle, and didn't seem impressed by the sports cars in his garage or the artwork worth millions on his walls. Anthony found himself curious. During his morning coffee, he'd sometimes watch her work through the security monitors. She moved with purpose, never wasting motion, never cutting corners. When other staff members tried to engage her in gossip about their employer, she'd simply redirect the conversation back to work. "She's different," he mentioned to his personal assistant, Marcus, during a business call one afternoon. Different how? Different like the others who pretended to be professional before they started leaving their phone numbers in your bedroom. Anthony paused. No. Actually different. What Anthony didn't know was that his unusual streak of hiring and firing had attracted the wrong kind of attention. Dr. Emeka Okonkwo, his former business partner turned bitter rival, had been watching the pattern. Each dismissed maid had been approached by Emeka's people, offered money for information about Anthony's routines, his security protocols, his vulnerabilities. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Use Anthony's distrust of domestic staff against him. Get someone inside, someone he'd never suspect, to map out his security blind spots. Then strike when he was most vulnerable. But Emeka hadn't counted on Serena Williams. The night everything changed started like any other. Anthony was working late in his study, reviewing quarterly reports for his upcoming board meeting. The mansion security system showed all clear, guards at their posts, perimeter secured, all staff accounted for and gone for the evening. Except Serena wasn't gone. She'd received word that afternoon that David's condition had worsened. The surgery needed to happen within the week, and she was still short on the required funds. She'd made the difficult decision to ask Mr. Anthony for an advance on her salary. It went against every principle her father had taught her about not mixing personal problems with work, but David's life hung in the balance. At 2 a.m., she was walking toward Anthony's study, rehearsing her request, when she heard something that didn't belong, the soft scrape of metal against glass. Someone was cutting through the reinforced window of the ground floor library, a blind spot in the security camera coverage that only someone with inside knowledge would know about. Serena's military training from her father kicked in immediately. She grabbed a mop from the cleaning closet, not ideal, but the wooden handle was solid and she knew how to use it. Moving silently, she positioned herself in the hallway between the library and Anthony's study. The assassin was professional, dressed in black, night vision goggles, a curved knife designed for silent kills. He moved like a shadow toward Anthony's study, completely unaware that anyone else was in the building. That's when Serena struck. "Stay back, sir," she commanded as the assassin's blade met her improvised weapon. The fight was brief but intense. The assassin had training, but Serena had something more valuable. She was fighting for someone she'd come to respect, in a job she desperately needed, against someone who threatened everything she was working toward. The assassin hit the floor unconscious just as Anthony emerged from his study, having heard the commotion. "What the hell, Serena?" Anthony stared at his maid, who was breathing hard but otherwise composed, standing over an unconscious man with a very real, very deadly knife. "Sir, I believe someone sent this man to harm you. We should call the police immediately." Anthony looked from the knife to Serena to the broken window, his mind racing. This wasn't a random break-in. This was professional. Someone wanted him dead, and somehow, his 71st maid had just saved his life. The investigation revealed what Anthony had suspected. The assassin was hired muscle, a professional killer with connections to corporate espionage networks. But what shocked Anthony more was learning about Serena's background when the police questioned her about her combat skills. "My father is retired Sergeant Major Williams, Nigerian Army," she explained matter-of-factly. "He taught me basic self-defense from age 10. He said a woman should never depend on others for her safety." That night, after the police left and the security system was reinforced, Anthony found himself in his kitchen at 4 a.m., making tea and trying to process what had happened. Serena was still there, having stayed to give her statement and ensure the security team had all the information they needed. "Serena," he said quietly, "why were you here so late?" For the first time since she'd started working for him, she hesitated. Then, with the same straightforward honesty she applied to everything else, she told him about David, about the surgery, about her plan to ask for an advance on her salary. "You needed money," Anthony said slowly, "and instead of trying to seduce me or steal from me like the others, you were going to ask for an honest advance." "Yes, sir. It seemed the proper way." Anthony laughed. not mockingly, but with genuine amazement. "Serena, do you realize that in 5 years, you're the first person who's asked me for money honestly? Everyone else tried to manipulate, seduce, or steal it." "I don't want anything I haven't earned, Mr. Okafor. My father taught me that integrity is the only currency that never devalues." That morning, Anthony not only approved the advance for David's surgery, he personally ensured the boy received care at the best cardiac facility in Lagos. But more importantly, he began to see Serena Williams not as just another employee, but as something he'd almost forgotten existed, a genuinely good person. Over the following weeks, as the investigation into the assassination attempt deepened, Anthony found himself relying on Serena's insights. She noticed details others missed, which staff members seemed nervous, who asked unusual questions, what small changes in routine might indicate larger problems. "You see everything, don't you?" he asked one afternoon after she'd identified a potential security vulnerability the professionals had missed. "My father always said situational awareness keeps you alive. In our village, you learn to read people and situations quickly." "And what do you read about me?" Serena considered this carefully. "I see a man who's built walls so high he's forgotten there are people worth trusting on the other side." It was the most personal thing she'd ever said to him, and it hit deeper than Anthony expected. The breakthrough in the case came 3 weeks later when Marcus, Anthony's personal assistant of 7 years, was arrested trying to plant listening devices in the mansion's security office. The betrayal cut deep. Marcus had been feeding information to Emeka Okonkwo for months, providing details about Anthony's routines, his security protocols, and his psychological state. "He knew about my trust issues with the maids," Anthony told Serena that evening. "He was feeding information to Emeka, who was using it to plan the perfect assassination. They figured I'd never suspect domestic staff of being part of a larger conspiracy." "But they didn't count on someone who was actually just there to work," Serena observed. "No. They didn't count on you." That night, Anthony realized something that terrified him more than any assassin. He was falling in love with Serena Williams. Not because she'd saved his life, but because she'd saved something more precious, his ability to trust again. She treated his wealth as irrelevant, his fame as unimportant, and his heart as something worth protecting not for what it could give her, but for what it meant to him. When she looked at him, she saw Anthony the man, not Anthony the billionaire. But love, Anthony had learned, was a luxury he couldn't afford. Everyone who'd ever claimed to care about him had ultimately wanted something: money, status, connections, or fame. How could he be sure Serena was different? The answer came in the most unexpected way. David's surgery was successful, and Serena had requested time off to visit him during recovery. Anthony had arranged for her to use his private jet, but she declined. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Okafor, but I'll take the commercial flight. It's more appropriate." "Serena, you saved my life. Let me make your life a little easier." "My life isn't difficult because I lack luxury, sir. It's difficult because people I care about are hurting. David is healing now, and that's all the ease I need." That evening, Anthony made a decision that surprised even him. He drove to the airport to see her off personally. "Serena," he said as she prepared to board her flight, "when you come back, I'd like to take you to dinner. Not as your employer. As a man who'd very much like to get to know the woman who changed his life." For the first time since he'd known her, Serena smiled, really smiled. "Mr. Okafor, Anthony. Please. Anthony. I'd like that very much. But I have one condition." "Anything." "No fancy restaurants. There's a small place in Garki that serves the best pepper soup in Abuja. That's where I'd like to go." Anthony laughed, the sound genuine and free. A woman who turns down private jets and prefers pepper soup to five-star dining. "Serena Williams, you continue to amaze me." 3 months later, Anthony Okafor made headlines again, not for firing another maid, but for announcing his engagement to one. The tabloids went crazy trying to understand how the woman who'd been dismissed as just another employee had captured the heart of Nigeria's most eligible bachelor. But those who knew the real story understood. Serena Williams hadn't tried to capture anything. She'd simply been herself, honest, principled, and completely unimpressed by everything except the man behind the wealth. On their wedding day, as Anthony stood waiting at the altar of the small church in Serena's village, he thought about the journey that had brought them there. 69 women had tried to win his fortune. Serena Williams had won his heart by protecting his life and showing him that trust wasn't a luxury he couldn't afford. It was a necessity he'd been denying himself. The retired sergeant major walked his daughter down the aisle with military precision, but Anthony caught the proud tears in the old soldier's eyes. As Serena approached in her simple but elegant dress, Anthony realized that sometimes the greatest treasure isn't what you've been searching for, it's what you've been lucky enough to find. Do you, Anthony Okafor, take Serena Williams to be your wife, to trust and to cherish, in prosperity and in challenge? I do, Anthony said, his voice strong and certain. For the first time in his adult life, those words came without hesitation, without fear, without the walls he'd built around his heart. And as they kissed to seal their union, the congregation erupted in celebration, not for the billionaire who'd found love, but for two people who'd found trust in a world that had taught them both to be careful with their hearts. The mansion in Abuja still stands, its marble halls now filled with laughter instead of suspicion. The security systems remain state-of-the-art, but they protect a home now, not just a house. And in the kitchen where they first really talked, there's a small framed photo of a young man in a hospital bed, smiling widely after successful heart surgery. A reminder that sometimes the best investments aren't in companies or technologies, but in the people brave enough to trust you with their truth. Anthony never fired another maid after Serena, mainly because she insisted on doing the housework herself. I know how to clean, she'd say with a smile, and I know you trust me to do it right. And in the evenings, when Anthony comes home from building his business empire, he finds his wife in their garden, tending to the vegetables she grows with the same methodical care she once used to polish his banister. Sometimes he'll join her, this billionaire who'd forgotten how to trust, learning from a village girl who'd never forgotten how to love. The story of Anthony and Serena became legend in Nigeria's business circles, not just because a maid married a billionaire, but because two people found something more valuable than wealth. They found each other's trust. And in a world where everything has a price, they discovered that the most precious things, love, loyalty, and the courage to be vulnerable, can never be bought. They can only be earned, one honest moment at a time. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales of love, trust, and unexpected connections. And comment below. Do you believe in love that transcends social boundaries? Share your thoughts, and don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest stories.